Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Fire 5 at Phoenix. You are joining me, Zoe Thompson from Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching, and you are also joined by Helena this morning, who's going to introduce herself in just a moment. So this is Fire 5 at Phoenix. We are recording this live. If you are tuning in and joining us live either through video or listening back, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we are talking about values and purpose. So it's our new topic for the month, and this is actually going to wind down this season. So these are the last few episodes on this season. I'm going to take a step back, rethink, and come up with something else for season 2. So watch this space. So let's not jump ahead of ourselves. Let's finish season 1 on a high first. And I'm so pleased to have our guest this morning. Helena, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and the amazing work that you do.
Oh, thank you so much, Zoe. Hi, everyone. My name is Helena Mitchell. I am a voiceover artist based here in Cheltenham. And as you can see, I'm in my booth at the moment. So I do a lot of random things. I'm also a writer. I have been on tour as an actor and dancer with Milkshake and CBeebies, which all of those people with young children will know. It's a young kind of kids TV program touring the country as Noddy and Fireman Sam and all of those glorious things. And yeah, lots of sort of comedy, kids entertainment, writing and voiceover and everything in between. So yeah, I voiced a couple of TV adverts such as Veet, hair removal cream. So some people might recognize my voice. But yeah, most of the time I'm either behind the mic or behind a camera. But I do also am a big advocate for mental health and chronic illnesses as well.
Love that. And I apologize, I pronounced your name.
No, it's all right, don't worry.
I know Helena, so that was the pronunciation that I went with. So I will make sure if I say it again that I say it correctly. It's so important, isn't it? Pronunciation and getting it right.
Yeah, that's all right, don't worry. It's a very common mistake. It's fine, I get it a lot of the time, I'm used to it. But yeah, so talking about values and purpose, I just kind of, when you asked me to come on, I thought, oh my goodness, values and purpose, this is such a huge topic and has some massive questions that many of us are constantly searching for probably most of our lives. So I thought, my goodness, how can I come up with just a few amount of questions? But I think the first one, which would be really good to kind of start us off with, is what do you value most about your life in terms of in work and also outside of work?
That's a great first question. You're right. It's such a huge topic, isn't it? So I think it'd be really interesting to see how people come up with some questions around the topic. So what do I value most in life, inside and outside of work? I'm very fortunate being self-employed, is that a lot of who I am and what I'm about comes through in the work that I do. So it's that advantage, isn't it, is that my core values personally are mirrored through my business, because I get to choose the direction and the vision and how I approach things. So having worked in a bigger organization, which has had some shared values and some slightly differing values, it's really nice to be able to kind of influence that and be in control of that. My values are around self-improvement, self-development, continuous improvement. I think for me, it's around not necessarily ever reaching the end point, although that's always great. But quite often I find that both I and people that I work with, when you get close to the end point that you've decided on, you're already setting the next one. So for me, it's that continuous improvement, whatever that looks like. I really value my health, having had health challenges over the years. Thankfully, health is very good. I am, very, very grateful for family and friends who are very supportive. So, just as me as a person, but also having set up the business a couple of years ago, people who've been really, really supportive. There's just so much, isn't there? But I think certainly from my values in terms of work and personal, they're actually written down. They're by the side. They're here in a frame. So it's making a difference, continuous improvement, and positivity. Those are my 3 core values that I quite often will reflect on, whether it's business decisions or whether it's personal decisions. I like to do things in a very positive way. I like to see what is positive about certain situations, and that the community element is really important as well, but that making a difference, obviously reflected in the work that I do. And so those are the 3 for me.
It can be hard though, can't it? It can be hard to kind of, it's easier said than done, I always say. Easier said than done. In those kind of tough moments, it can be really hard to kind of maintain it. So I think that's really good that you've got them sort of kind of right by your side. But for people that, I mean, most people probably do know you and your life, but for those people that don't, you've had quite a varied career, haven't you? So have you found that your values have changed for inside work and outside work over the course of your varied career life?
I don't know if they've changed. I'm definitely more aware of them now. I'm definitely more, in terms of making sure that what I do and how I do it is in alignment with those values. I guess if you were to speak to people who've known me for a very long period of time, they would probably say that those have always been there.
Yeah.
And certainly when I look back at times of my life where I haven't been as happy and as fulfilled, and I look at those 3 and I look at other, the kind of bigger picture, I can see why I wasn't so happy. I can see that some of those things were out of alignment. Yeah. So I think they have always been there. I think how they have been met or how they have been aligned has changed over the years, but I think they have always been there. I think if, like I said, if you were to speak to somebody who's known me for a lot longer, they would probably say that that's mirrored in things that I've done and the way that I've done them. But I think I'm much more aware of them now, much more about kind of checking in with them and sort of making very conscious decisions around them. Whereas I think before, I think they probably influenced my choices, but not necessarily consciously.
Yeah. So in terms of mixing a bit of purpose into that as well, because values and purpose can be sort of aligned and they can also be quite different, and you can actually find a sort of battle within yourself in terms of, these are my values, but I feel that this is my purpose in life. Do you find that have you found that your value and purpose has changed over the years due to the people that you've been surrounded with, whether that's family, friends, or colleagues? Have anyone around you actually influenced your values and your purpose?
Great question. Oh, I need to really reflect on that one too.
Because some people, they grow up with a certain value. They grow up with morals, because as we grow up, we usually take that from our parents, because we don't know any different. So our parents and our immediate family and potentially our friends around us. But then as we start to get a bit older and we start to kind of become our own person, we maybe then hang around with people that change our viewpoint, or we travel the world and we end up changing our viewpoint and things. So has anyone in particular kind of really influenced you and has notably influenced you and your purpose or values?
I think people have really tested them. If you look at it from a different angle, I think people have really tested them. And I think that's the challenge sometimes, isn't it? Is you don't know how important something is until you have to fight for it, until you have to fight for it to exist in your world and for it to be there. So I think over the years, the things that I have done have quite often had that theme running through. And I think there have been certain individuals over the years who have really encouraged me to step into different spaces that are definitely in alignment with those values. I haven't necessarily seen it that way at the time. So I think other people I think it's the same with capability and ability, isn't it? It's a lot of the time, other people see our potential before we see it ourselves. And so I know that over the years, when I was employed, there were, a few key people in that time who really encouraged me to step forward and challenge myself and step forward in different directions, because I think they saw the potential. They saw potentially a bit further down the path than I was able to see. And so I think they've really influenced being able to shape some of the decisions that I've made that have essentially brought me to where I am now. And I think they've seen, I think in terms of, making a difference, positivity, people who encouraged me to go into self-development training, for example, that's a lot about making a difference. Positivity, continuous improvement. That's all three of those right there in a nutshell. Is it something that I would have considered had other people not had that conversation with me? I don't know. I don't know that I would have necessarily taken a step in that direction. So, and that made a real difference for me, because it just opened up so many other opportunities, and I found what I love to do. I found that place where, your eyes light up, and it lights that fire, doesn't it? That it's very hard to put words to, but your face lit up, so I know that you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I'm guessing that, especially in the work that you do, that you probably have that moment as well. Has it been? There's definitely key people for me. Has it been the same for you? Have there been people that have helped you shape that into those stages?
there's. I think it's a tricky kind of one, isn't it? Because you have influential people in your life, in terms of most people have a teacher or a mentor or some sort of lecturer or something like that really kind of influenced them and guided them in terms of their career. But then in terms of your personal life, there is almost that sort of mentor and influential people within your life as well. And I really do think that, very similar to what you were saying, there's been a lot of times in life where, I'm only 26, but I've been through quite a lot already, and I'm actually quite fortunate about that. Very similar to you, I like to see the positive as and when I can. Not saying it's easy, really difficult, really hard to see the positive. And there are many days when I sit there and I moan and I very much go, woe is me. But then I have to have the people around me to be able to support me, to help me get out of that. Because I think it is a little bit like when you've got blinkers on and, like a horse with blinkers on, you kind of, it's very difficult when you're in those moments to see the bigger picture. And I think that it's those people around you that influence you most, but they also, there's that saying of your vibe attracts your tribe. And so I think the people that are around you, it's like taking a mold, but they're not completely molding you into something that's unrecognizable. They're just almost polishing you up and finishing you off, but then you're doing the same for them. So it's not a complete change, it's just almost similar to you, a refining. And even if, I always think that people who come into your life that really kind of clash with you come into your life for a reason. They come into your life because they clash with you. So that really then means that whatever it is that you're clashing about really is important to you. And you might not have realized that before. But, so it's not ever really a negative thing. It's like, wow, okay, I really didn't agree with what this person said. I'm going to be thankful for that, because now I know that clearly that is a really big value of mine. That's really important to me. And as a result, you then might go, wow, I had no idea. Actually, that really excites me. That really, lights that fire and that passion. Maybe that's somewhere that I need to go. So it's not necessarily positive moments around your life or positive people around your life that can influence you. It can actually be negative clashes that can influence you, because it awakens things up inside you.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. I'm very grateful to have had both. I've had people that have had those conflicting values that have really made me reflect and fight for what I believe in and what I believe is important to me. It might not be important to the next person,
and
but it's important to me, and absolutely that's okay. And I think this is why quite often people call them core values, don't they? Because they're here, they're kind of really centered and ingrained, and I think people can help us to see value in other things, and we can see value in other perspectives and other people's values and what's important to other people, because that's what makes them them. And so you wouldn't want to change that in the same way that you wouldn't want to change yours. I think it's that core value, isn't it? But it's being able to have sort of eyes wide open in being able to see why things are important to other people, why other people hold different values, and being really open to finding out why those values are really important to them. What is it in their experience that has shaped that? What is it? Absolutely. And I think that's always the amazing thing about meeting new people, isn't it? Of really getting to, to find out who they are and what they're about, what's important to them, and what's happened in their lifetime that has really shaped that. What is it that they have experienced that has really helped them to become who they are today, and why you connect with them. And I think we can connect with people with different values.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's that understanding, isn't it, that that's theirs, it belongs, it's theirs, it's important to them, and it's not about shaping or reshaping it for other people, but it's helping, like you said, that other people help us to see value in other things and help us to shape our perspective, not necessarily flip it on its head. And I think that's a value in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay if it does flip it on its head though as well, because sometimes, there could be a whole world or a whole viewpoint that you weren't even aware of because of the people around you, because of that's the nature nurture argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's about, it's okay if it doesn't completely flip on its head, but it's also okay if it does. And it's also okay, I love discussing with people because I think it's so interesting. Even if we don't agree, I think it's so fascinating to genuinely try, and I always say this to people, to encourage people to try and genuinely understand how they've got to that viewpoint or how they've got to that decision. You don't need to agree with it, but just try to understand it. And also calmly try and explain how you got to your decision and why it's important to you. Again, they don't need to agree with you, but just by being a little bit more self-aware, but also aware of the people around us, just be a bit kinder as well to everyone, and just
it's curiosity, isn't it? It's approaching these conversations with curiosity of the whys. And I think the flip the table, this is about you being in control of the table, your tables that you flip. This is not about you going around and trying to flip other people's tables. This is about you being open to understanding and being curious and listening and learning. And if it flips your own table, it flips your own table, but it's not about flipping other people's tables.
Exactly. And that kind of leads on nicely to the next question, which is, do you think that your value and your purpose in life, in your eyes, will truly reflect the value and purpose other people see in your life? So in terms of what you value and what you believe your purpose to be internally, does that mirror and does that reflect in what other people see in you? Or is there a difference? And if so, why?
That's really interesting. I would love to say yes. I would love to say that people on the outside looking in could see that for themselves, their interpretation of how I show up, how I engage, how I speak with people, how I, respond and how I live would reflect those values. And I've named them now, so I would be really open for those who just, again, out of curiosity of what other people see to how I think I want to show up and how I fully intend to show up. And interestingly, I was listening to there's some coaching training sessions going on at the moment. and they're sort of mini seminars with different people from global coaches from around the world. And I was listening to one yesterday, so I put earphones in, went for a walk while I was listening in. And I was really starting to think as they were talking, how, about that sort of the legacy of how do I want to be seen, not just when I've kind of moved onto whatever the next is, but even now. And it's that there were two kind of key elements that just kept coming back to me of how, people who I meet, of that, it sounds quite egotistical, but it's leaving people feeling better than when you leave them. How do I want people who I meet, who I work with, who I engage with, whether it's personally or professionally, how do I want to leave those people feeling? And I want them to feel better. I don't know how to describe that. That's not saying that I have that influence, but even just in terms of people coming away from a conversation thinking, I enjoyed that, or feeling better. And I guess the opposite to that is not leaving people feeling negative or drained or demotivated when you've spoken to them. So that was the first thing, of leaving people better. And then the second thing that came up for me was giving more back than I have taken in this lifetime, which I guess will look different. Will when I mention that, it will resonate with people in different ways. But I think I have whatever time I have in this world, and I want to, on balance, give back more than I have taken. And I would love,
though, isn't it? It's hard to do that, because especially nowadays, I feel like there's a big culture, and I hope I'm wrong. My personal experience is that feels like there's a big culture of take, and not really much give. It's always, okay, if I give you that, what do I get in return? What do I benefit from? And there's this whole culture about, you can't just, I feel like people feel uncomfortable with just giving and leaving it at that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, how you hear people talking about, it's the people pleasing element. And I think there's a balance with anything, with any of these characters and behaviors. There's a balance, and there's a point where it's either overdone or underdone, so it's out of balance, where it starts to become a negative. People pleasing in balance is a bloody lovely thing to do. And I think it's in balance, but I think we tend to go with extremes, don't we? So people like, you don't want to be a people pleaser, or you don't want to, it's that labeling of certain behaviors and making it feel for people that is a negative. Now, if it feels negative to you before you've had that conversation, then it's a case of readdressing that balance. So do you need to dial it down a little bit, or maybe you need to turn it up a little bit so that it feels a positive for you? But ultimately, if something feels positive to you and it's not having a negative impact in your life, if other people see that as a negative, that's on them. So if you are quite happy in your world, feels, as I say this is going to be controversial, which I don't tend to do, but it feels like if it's a positive thing for you and it's not having a negative impact, then that's for you to work that out. It's not for other people to give it a label and label it as that's a negative.
And there's that whole thing, isn't there, of we're in control of our own space and our own surroundings. So, if you take it in terms of COVID, there's that whole thing of, okay, there's some people that aren't going to be really socially distancing, and there's some people that aren't going to be wearing masks and stuff like that. That's because that's what they believe in and that's what they feel is right. But if I feel like that makes me uncomfortable, in a sense, that's not really their problem. That's my problem. So I get myself out of that situation because I can control my space around me and I can just move away.
Yeah.
I think it's the same.
And it's, different people are going to have different opinions, and they are going to have different perspectives on whether a behavior is positive or negative. Yeah. And that's okay. That's based on their experiences. Yeah. But I think it's that influence, isn't it, of if it doesn't feel like it's a negative to you, then that doesn't, just because somebody else sees it as a negative doesn't mean that that is a negative. But with anything, it's in balance, isn't it? And if it's out of balance, it has a tendency to then become a negative. So it's not about removing the behavior completely, it's just about dialing it up or dialing it down to bring it back into balance. But some people will take advantage. If you are somebody in terms of that give and take, some people will take advantage of that. From my point of view, that's on them. That's for them to sit and work that out for themselves, whether or not they felt comfortable doing that. And different people will have different boundaries. So actually, if somebody has taken more than they have given, their boundaries might be different. Their perspective on it might be different. In their eyes, they might not see that they have taken more than they've given. So again, it's just, you have to, at some point, take a step back and think, I can't worry about what other people are thinking. This is what makes me happy. This is how I feel fulfilled. This is how I like to show up with people. And ultimately, other people will respond to that in different ways. But I can own and stand by how I choose to show up.
Yeah. But that's so difficult, isn't it? Again, it sounds so easy to say. And I'm sure that there's many people watching this thinking, oh yeah, well, like that's the ideal, I would love to be able to live like that, and I can tell myself that I'll live like that, but it's so much harder.
And don't get me wrong, I have not nailed this down and have this perfectly nailed down on a day-to-day basis. I still will question of, okay, do I need to take a step back? Do I just need to dial this down a little bit? Do I need to look at the energy that is being reflected here and maybe adjust my energy and how I'm showing up to match the other person's? Does that feel comfortable for me? Or am I then starting to almost negotiate how I want to show up? And this is a constant internal conversation of, how do I want to show up? How does the other person maybe want me to show up? Where is the balance for that? And what am I comfortable with to be able to work that through? And that is, don't get me wrong, I haven't nailed it. It's definitely a work in progress. And I don't always get it right either. But that's for me then to sit and reflect, okay, where did that go wrong? Was that on me? Was that something that I need to reflect on to kind of show up differently another time? But
and is that something that you do internally, or is that something that you go to others for?
Internally. It's something I sit and just reflect on. And that might be my ideal of how I want to show up. It might be very different for other people. There'll be some people listening and watching that will have a completely different opinion and a completely different perspective, and that's okay. This is my ideal. This is how I want to show up in my life. This doesn't mean that this is how other people need to show up, but it ultimately is working out and reflecting what's good for you, what's best for you. This isn't a right or a wrong. This is what's important to you. How do you want to show up? How do you want to show up for you? Because ultimately, how other people see you show up will be very different. It will be influenced by their own values and beliefs. And so even how you choose to show up might be seen differently by 10 different people. So it's always just about flipping that script of, okay, what is it that's important to me, and making sure that is settled. And then look at how other people might see it from different perspectives.
And I think that's so true. And I mean, talking of different perspectives and 10 people seeing it differently, and also more importantly, how you choose to show up and how you choose to portray yourself. And is that actually true to who you are, or is it slightly a facade and false? How do you think social media and the pandemic have affected our own view on things we value?
It's been such a crazy 12 months, hasn't it, in terms of understanding what's important to us. And there's so many things that COVID has impacted. And I think COVID has impacted everybody, but in very different ways. And so when we look at what's important to us, there will be some people who have almost been gifted what's important to them. And there will be some people who have had things taken away that have been important to them. And it's like we said with that when we talked about that first question of fighting for what's important and letting go of what's not important has been, I think, probably one of the biggest journeys for a lot of people over the last 12 months. I think a lot of people, that's probably something that we share in common, is that we have recognized and probably taken more notice of and been more conscious of what's important and what's not important. And I think now we have this great opportunity as we start to move into that sort of next phase of, okay, what do we bring with us and what do we leave behind?
Yeah. And how do you think social media has affected our view on things that we value?
I think social media is a heavy filtered view. And I think social media has been a huge support to a lot of people over the last year. And I think it's just so heavily filtered, isn't it? People choose, consciously choose what they share on social media. And also a lot of us consciously choose what we want to see on social media. And I think that's, we see what we want to see. When we don't like it, we filter it out. What we like, we switch kind of, that's how the algorithms work, isn't it? It turns up what it thinks we do want to see, and it turns down what it thinks we don't. But it's not our conscious decision. That's a computer system that is reading the patterns of our behavior when we show up online. And I think in terms of posting, most people think very carefully about what they post, and that doesn't mean that it's not authentic. It just means it's filtered into what we choose to put out there. And so I think that does have an impact, because it's not, even if it's reality, it's a filtered reality.
And it's difficult on the receiving end to remind yourself in that moment that it might not necessarily be true, because it looks so true and the filter is so good. And I always like to say that social media is, when we compare ourselves to others on social media, it's like comparing our backstage to other people's front stage.
That's just a great analogy.
It's just not the same. No. And our front stage probably looks incredible to other people's backstage. See, our backstages are both a mess.
Chaos.
It's absolutely chaos to make sure that the front stage looks incredible, because what's being presented to the world is polished and finesse, but backstage you've got all the props, you've got all of the crying actors, you've got everything going on, and so how do you think that, if it has at all, because it might not have, I don't know, it's kind of your opinion here, how do you think social media and or the pandemic has affected or altered or changed our purpose in life?
I don't know if it's changed purpose, but I think it might have shone a light on it. I think for a lot of people, I've had this conversation with a lot of people over the last 12 months of it kind of hit the pause button for people, didn't it? It was that not in our control, not in our influence, but somebody somewhere just went, everybody stop what you're doing, put everything down and think, what are you doing and what do you want? And so even whether it was furlough, whether it was changing your working hours or where you were working, or the type of role that you were doing changed, or the way that you were doing work changed, or whether you were just sent home for the week while everybody worked it all out, we all had to hit this pause button of just this huge disruption of change. And with change, it's that opportunity, isn't it? But I think what it did do for a lot of people was give people space to think. to, you know, what am I doing here? What do I want? And actually, you know, I wrote a blog on it because there were a lot of people who said to me that COVID almost rescued them from a situation that they felt out of control of. You know, the impending burnout, the overwhelm, stress, anxiety, that the first lockdown gave them that space and gave them that pause button that they desperately needed, but they didn't know how close they were to that burnout.
Yeah, they needed to see the outer picture, the bigger picture. And I think as well that there's been many people that I've spoken to who've actually really struggled with lockdown, and they couldn't just sit still and take the pause, and they realized that for them, keeping busy is a form of therapy for them. That's how they manage, that's how they survive, and it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's controlled and they're aware of it. But I think as well that there's many people who have, you know, they've for many years been stuck in a job that they haven't been particularly happy about, but they just didn't know how to get out of it. And actually the fact that the business went under, or the fact that, you know, they needed to lose a couple of people, it gave them that golden ticket to go, actually, here's my segue. I'm going to say goodbye without feeling bad, because the whole world was in that, you know, situation.
And that's where the conversations people are having now, isn't it? Is that, again, it's forcing people to make a conscious decision. So rather than just rolling with the waves of life of, okay, this is happening, so we're just going to go with it because it's easier than trying to get out or swim in an opposite direction and fight the tide. What's happening now is that people are, you know, that transition of going back into work, going back into the office, going back into that commute, going back into that traveling around the country, going back into working long hours. And the thought of returning to that, having had this last 12 months of doing something in a different way, is really forcing, again, people to think, what do I want and what's important to me?
Yeah, so like family, or
that values around, you know, family, balance, you know, having that fulfillment in work. All of these things have suddenly been, again, brought to the surface of making a conscious decision rather than just going with the tide. And, you know, some people are now saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to get out. I want to look at what I can do. I want to look at what my options are, and I want to explore what else is possible. So I think in terms of that values and purpose, I don't know that it's changed it, but I think it has made people more conscious of it, more noticing more about the impact of life decisions, positive and negative, and giving people the opportunity to make changes, because there's so many other changes that are happening that's creating that kind of shuffle for people to do something different.
And I think as well that actually it's made big, and I'm talking kind of big corporate businesses here, as well as, you know, smaller businesses with fewer kind of employees, it's made those kind of big bosses really value their employees a lot more, because I think there's a lot more of a human there's been more of a human element put into business, because we've seen everyone's kids running around the back going, Daddy, so-and-so was trying to put pants on my head, blah, blah, blah. And you're in the middle of a really important pitch meeting. And it's not the kids' fault, and they can't do anything about that. And I think there's more of a humanity life that we go, you're actually a real human behind that suit. Okay, we've actually got a lot in common. And I think as a result, a lot more business has been made, because people realize that outside of the paperwork and the suits and the glass boardrooms, they both have 2 kids that are roughly the same age. And so they can go, oh my gosh, my 2-year-old's having an absolute nightmare. Is yours as well? Yeah. Oh, do you fancy doing that pitch for me next week? Oh, that'd be great. You know, and there's more of a human connection. So I think going forward, business is actually changing in a nicer way, because people can have more of a genuine connection.
And discovering shared values.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which we might not have had that conversation before. We might not have known what's important to people. We might not have known the things that are really important to them. And I think one thing, certainly things, working in with businesses, is that the change of conversation around the fact that this isn't a one size fits all, and we talk about the hybrid working coming in now, that leaders, managers, business owners need to have one-on-one conversations with people and listen to what that person needs to help them to perform at their best in what you're paying them to do. And so what we're doing is we're kind of, instead of like, well, you can do this or you can do this, but you choose what works best for you, with no real interest in why they want A or B. Companies, and certainly the ones that I'm working with, which might mean that they're more forward thinking in terms of employee well-being and understanding, because they're bringing in a coach and well-being specialist, is that people are wanting to understand what's important, which essentially is they're wanting to understand the values, aren't they? They're wanting to understand what people want. How can, if you've got a happy member of staff, you get a very productive, high-performing member of staff. And so rather than kind of throwing out performance targets, people are starting to have those conversations. That's not to say people didn't before, but more people are starting to have those conversations about how can we help you make it work for you? What can we do? What do you need? How can we support that? Which means we're getting to know the individuals. We're starting to, like you said, understand who's on our team, what else goes on outside of the 9 to 5, what's important to them, how do they spend their time, how have they been impacted, what support do they need. So the connection, you're right, is much stronger for those people who are doing it well,
and they end up actually, bosses end up getting more value for money as well in their employees.
Value your staff and you get your value returned.
Totally.
3, 4, double, 10 times.
Exactly.
That's my strong point. But I know that the return on that investment of valuing your staff, you get a huge return on that investment.
And final question. So for someone who's struggling to find their own self-worth, value and purpose, what advice do you have based on your own experiences in life?
I think the first step is to work out what it is for you. I think you asked me earlier about whether I have that conversation with myself or whether I go to other people for that conversation. I think it is a reflection for you to work on. And you can have support to do that. Don't get me wrong. I have lots of conversations in a coaching role with people who are trying to work that out. But it is something that you need to uncover and work out for yourself. I think, I've worked with people, we've worked out, they've worked out what they think their values are, what's important to them. And they might have then gone and had a conversation with a partner or people who spend lots of time with them and say, what do you see? Do you agree? Like, have I missed something? Like, how else do you see it? What's your perspective? And I think that helps, but I think you have to take that first step first. I have free resources on the website, so if anybody's watching this listening back and thinks, actually, I could do with just having something to work through, if you're sort of more logical approach, I've got free resources. I'll pop the link in, people can have a look, or just pop me a message, I can send it to you. But it's that the first step is paying attention, taking notice, being conscious of what they are, and then start to question, how are you showing up for those now, and how do you want to show up for those in the future? Quite often when we're not comfortable with things, it's because our values are out of alignment, or we're not fulfilling our purpose of things we're passionate about in the way that we want to, or with as much time that we want to. So I think it's just taking notice of what they are, being aware of what they are, and then start to think about, how do I show up for it now? Am I getting that return? Am I making decisions that are in alignment? And how can I continue to build on that moving forward? And how else do I want to show up to that? Are there gaps in there that I want to do something different? But it's not, this is not if you just spend 2 weeks and just give it your real attention, that'll be it. This is daily this is daily in how you communicate with people, how you show up, how you engage, how you kind of get out of those conversations. And it's so rewarding, that investment in just that. It is living in alignment. It's living in alignment with what's important to you. And it is, I think it really helps with that authenticity of knowing that you're showing up for who you are and what's important. And you'll find people who vibe off of that. You'll find people who might have that sort of shared values. You might find people with a different set of values, but they connect with you based on who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's so awesome. And I just find it so interesting because based on, what we said right at the beginning, with it being such a huge topic and something that many people kind of search for most of their life, I think you've done a really good job today of kind of showing your value and your purpose, but also including what other people, I'm sure there's loads of people here that have gone, yeah, me too, or oh, that's interesting, I've not thought of that before, and stuff like that. So it's been really amazing to speak to you today.
It's been, the thing that I love about doing these is that I love the fact that because you write the questions, that you will have sat and thought about it from your perspective and come at it from your, based on your experiences. And I know you talked a little bit about that at the beginning, about some of your journey, and that's reflected in the questions that you've asked. And so I love that, but I love the fact that it, even within how people come in and ask questions, that their values and the things that are important to them come through in the questions that they ask. And I love that, because it means 4 different guests means that I will get 4 different 20 questions coming from different perspectives and based on different values. So it shows up everywhere. It really does show up everywhere. And I think it is that knowing who you are and what you're about, isn't it, is so important.
And what you value.
Because if you don't know, it's very easy to be influenced by other people. And it's very easy when you don't know what's important or the direction that you're going in, everything becomes an option.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like for me, kindness is key. Kind heart and laughing. And I think if nothing else, we've learned over the last year and a half that life's far too short. We have no idea what's going to happen. So what's the point in doing something that you don't enjoy or that you don't value? What's the point? You might as well go just pop off now. Just do stuff that you value, do stuff that makes your heart happy, and ultimately if you love what you do, that will come through, and then the right customers and clients will come to you because they will share that passion and share that value and purpose. Whereas if you really don't like what you're doing, I mean, there are people that don't like what they're doing, but their reason for doing it is so strong. Like, for example, they could be, I don't know, stacking shelves or something like that, and they could absolutely hate that job. That might not be where they wanted to be right now, but it's helping to pay for their child to get through university. And so that is the passion, and that's the value, and that's the purpose for doing this job. And so therefore, although what they're actually doing they don't enjoy, it will still come out as they're passionate about it.
It's the enabling, isn't it? It's something that enables them to do the important thing. And let's face it, for a lot of us, being able to find that passion and purpose that also pays the bills is, that's quite a hard
golden ticket.
That's a hard ticket. Yeah, absolutely. It's a hard goal to hit, isn't it? Because quite often we might be able to hit 1 or 2, but to get all of them is really difficult. So sometimes we might have something that helps pay the bills, but that enables us to go and get the passion and the purpose through hobbies, through volunteering, through life in general. Exactly. And so it is, I don't think it's about meeting your purpose necessarily through work, but it's about knowing what that is, knowing what's important to you, what you value, and making sure that across the spectrum of your world, you are ticking those boxes.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more.
And that feels like a good note to end on. Amazing. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and thank you so much for your questions. For those of you who are watching, listening back, do please, feel free to comment and ask questions. I keep an eye on it. I'm more than happy to answer. My contact details will be in the information section. Helena's will be there too. Feel free to make contact, ask questions. And if you've heard things that we're talking about today that you think are of value to other people, please do feel free to share. But thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. We will be back again next week with a new guest and new questions, same topic. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. And we will see you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you all again very soon.